Welcome back to Posture Labs and Alignment Fundamentals. My name is Emma and I am your guide. Today we are on episode 18 and we'll be covering dancer pose or Natarajasana. This is a balancing pose and a back bend, so it can be pretty challenging. Of course, I will always give you steps, tips, and tricks how to get into the pose, as well as the correct alignment and things you should prioritize in the pose. Before we begin, I would recommend being a little bit warmed up before doing this pose, as it is a little bit challenging, especially just do some cat-cows, maybe some gentle twists. You can do those while you listen to me explain it, and then we can go through it together. So for this pose, we'll do it on one leg and then the other. I'll do it from the side and facing forward so you can see from multiple angles. Dancer pose will take place on one foot. So let's start with that right leg. I'm gonna balance on my right leg and I'm gonna hug my left heel up towards my butt. So I'm really engaging my left hamstring already. So instead of just lifting the heel up, I'm actually squeezing the back of my leg. I want to take my left hand and grab an inside grip on the foot. So that means the eye of the elbow is pointing outwards. I'm grabbing the inner edge of my foot. Now for a lot of us, that might not be possible. That's okay. You can start with an outside grip. Just know that eventually you would ideally want to change to this inside grip. You might also use a strap and wrap it around your foot and grab that if you're unable to reach your foot. You could even use a towel, which I have here. So a towel could kind of act as a strap around your foot if you are unable to grab your foot. So something like that is always helpful. Now, once you've got that inside grip, I still want you to think about keeping the thighs together and hips square. It's kind of easy for this left hip point to pull back and my left knee to pull back. So I want to think about gluing the inner thighs together and squaring my hips forward. Once I do that, it's easier for me to square my chest forward. I'm actually going to start with this right arm in a cactus shape. That's going to help me keep my shoulders square as I get into the pose. So this is kind of step one. You also might start with the arm up. That's totally fine. Step one. Step two, I like to put a little bend in my standing leg, press through the big toe mound of my foot. Start to kick back and hinge forward. As I do this, I'm constantly dropping my left hip. So anytime my left hip wants to open up to the left, I'm pulling it back down and I'm kicking directly back. Cactusing this right arm is helping me tug my right shoulder back. It's easier to make the shoulders uneven if I reach the arm forward. So now my right shoulder is going forward, my left shoulder is going back. If I do that, I just want to consciously kind of suck the right upper arm bone back in towards the shoulder joint. Try to keep the shoulders square, left hip dropping. I'm kicking back and up. Shoulder blades kind of drawing together because it's a back bend, pressing to the big toe mound of my foot and looking over my fingers. Now I'm going to gently kick out to release. It's kind of a lot on that standing leg. So that's why I like a little bend in the knee. If you're locking out your leg, it might feel a little bit easier, but you're actually not even working the muscles as much because you're just relying on the joint to be locked and hold you into that position. That's of course not great on your knee joint, so a gentle bend in this standing leg is going to make the pose a lot more challenging and more beneficial to you. Let's go ahead and try that on the other side, and I'll show you from the side. You can imagine you have headlights on your hips. I've talked about this in other tutorials, but you want to keep your hips as square as possible. So you'll notice that standing leg, the hip starts to turn outwards, more of like it would in a half moon, and you want to keep your hips as square as possible towards the mat, like you have headlights on your hips that are pointing in the same direction. All right, we're hugging the right heel up towards the butt. Right hand grab the inside edge of your foot. Eye of the elbow pointing out. Now think about squeezing the legs together, hips square, and then this right shoulder is kind of coming forward. I'm going to start with this left arm in a cactus shape. That's actually going to help my back bend. I can feel those shoulder blades draw together already. Little bend standing leg, big toe mound of the foot pressing down. Start to kick back. I continue to drop my right hip. Maybe I get here, and that's totally fine. I can also extend my left arm forward, but I want to suck that left arm back towards the shoulder joint. So I want to keep my chest square, keep hinging forward. Think about pressing your spine in towards your heart. Look over your left fingers. Keep dropping the outer right hip. And gently kick to release. So the entire time my hips are staying square, this hip is dropping. That's going to make it much more challenging. However, better to do the pose correctly, even if it is more challenging, than just jump into the pose, even if it looks cooler. I'll show you also from the side. So let's start standing on the right leg, hug your left heel up towards your butt and grab an inside grip. You want to make sure everything is nice and square first and that you have your balance. If you don't feel balanced, don't rush the pose. Wait until you feel you have a solid base. A little bend in the knee. Let's start with the arm extended this time. So right arm reaching up, melt the shoulder away from the ear, but I want to square my shoulders. So right shoulder a little back, left shoulder a little forward. Start to kick back and up, hinging forward, press down through the big toe mound of the right foot. I'm being careful to not jut my right shoulder forward. It keeps plugging back. Left hip dropping, looking forward, heart space forward, shoulder plug back. If my left hip starts to open, I'm going to drop that left hip down, almost like I'm twisting a little bit to the right. I can think about my right hip crease coming back. And kick to release. All right, other side. Go for an inside grip, right hand on the foot. Get your stability first. Inner thigh squeeze, everything nice and square. Left arm reach up, and if the shoulder is shrugging up by the ear, I'm going to melt that back down. Big inhale. Exhale, kick back into the right hand. Right hip drop, left shoulder comes back. Take it nice and slow. Choose one spot to focus your gaze. Low belly firm. Spine pressing in so the sternum goes forward. Left shoulder plugs back. Chin a little forward. Right hip drop. Kick back. And kick to release nice and gently. This is a very challenging pose. It's one that the more you do, the easier it will become. Remember the tip to use the strap. So if grabbing your foot is not accessible, you can always use a towel or a strap around your foot. I would encourage you to still go for that outside grip with the eye of the elbow pointing out so that eventually, once you gain the flexibility, that will feel more familiar for you versus turning your eye of the elbow in. So still keep the eye of the elbow turned out as you kick back. This will be a little bit easier if your quadriceps are tight or if you have any knee pain. It doesn't require you to bend that back leg as much. Like I've mentioned, it can be a lot on your standing leg hamstring, in which a little bend in your knee will be super, super helpful. If you have trouble keeping your balance, to me the best way, the best tip is to choose one spot, a drishti point, and focus on that. The more you try to look around, your body and your mind get disoriented. So better to choose one spot, keep your focus there. If you notice you're holding your breath, just do your best to breathe. It should not take you out of the pose. Other things that will help your balance are engaging your core area. Keep thinking about pulling your belly button back, little micro bend in your joints. That's always going to be helpful as well. Let me know if you have any other tips or tricks for dancer pose or if there's anything I missed. I do also want to touch on kind of on the standing leg a little bit more. Here your hips are internally rotating, so you're kind of thinking about this standing leg, the inner thigh going back a little bit and the outer thigh going forward. You want to keep your knee in the direction of your second toe. Now for that standing leg, you're kind of thinking about the inner thigh lifting. So I kept saying outer hip dropping, but you can also envision, if I'm doing this balancing on my right leg, I can kind of envision my left inner thigh spiraling up. That might help me with the hip drop if that cue doesn't resonate with you. So you want to think your thighs are internally rotating. The inner thighs going towards center, the outer thighs wrapping around. Now, of course, that motion is not happening actually. I'm not turning my thigh muscles. It's thinking about that engagement instead of squeezing your glute muscles together and thinking of the inner thighs going away from each other, which would be external rotation. So a lot of these cues are just micro adjustments. They're not huge things that you can actually see in your body, just little things to keep in the back of your head. All right, let me know if you have any questions, comments, or other tips and tricks for Natarajasana, dancer pose. Otherwise, I hope you found this video useful. Let me know your thoughts, and I will see you back next week for another balancing pose.